Hello once again. If you've watched the first video in the series, you learned a little something hopefully about pivot chord modulation. I want to look at a slightly different type of modulation now. This is sometimes referred to as direct modulation, in which there is no preparation for the modulation. It's just we're in a key and then blam, we're in another key. Sometimes this is known as phrase modulation if a new phrase begins in the new key. This is sometimes also referred to as abrupt modulation. So what you've got in front of you is a chorale by J.S. Bach, O Herzensangst, roughly translated, O Heart's Angst. Not saying it's that hard of a language to learn. I want you to just listen to the chorale in its entirety, and we're going to focus in on one section of it. So here is O Herzensangst by J.S. Bach. That's a really nice chorale in a lot of ways. Point out the interesting chromatic bass line right through here in bar 8, which adds a little bit of flavor to everything. What key would you say we're in if we're going with what we see here? Now it begins and ends in E flat, so I think that's a fair statement to say it's an E flat. The first two phrases, this is sort of a half cadence. This is a 5-4-2 going to a 1-6. Although not our normal resolution. It's not that he doesn't take it into the same octave. He leaps the bass up an octave because he can do that. He's J.S. Bach. But when we get to the end of the first full statement here, we're clearly in E flat still. Now something happens right around here. We see a pivot to B flat. We could argue that what we have here is not a pivot. This is a 5 chord in the original key and a 1 chord in the new key. You could argue that it's a direct or phrase modulation, but I think you could also make an argument that it's a pivot modulation. But from bar 6 on, we seem to be in B flat. If I start playing at bar 6, if you just heard bar 6 forward, you'd hear that in B flat. And then the next phrase, you're going to hear that in B flat as well. So I think we can make an argument that either through pivot or through a direct modulation, we're in B flat at this point. So I think that would be a fair statement to make as well. Now once we get into bar 11, we start with a downbeat chord that's clearly a B flat chord, but then we get a little chromatic, and we end up with a nice linear cadence on C minor. So if we're picking up at bar 11 here, that's clearly C minor. And we continue with the next section in C minor as well. 1, 4, 6, 6, 4, 5 with embellishment. That's pretty straightforward. So somewhere around here, either this is a pivot, so the 1 of B flat becomes the subtonic of C minor. That might look something like this if we're doing it this way. set this up here so it's a little easier to read. We're still in B flat up top here, and then with the new key of, we end up with something like this, and it's just 5 extended till we get to the 1. 5 is extended through linear motion. And then we stay in C minor all the way through here, as a little reminder. I think that's pretty clear. But as we get into this last phrase, let me back up to, pick up to bar 13 again, so you can hear this. As it is. Clearly C minor. And then something happens. Let's look at this chord on beat 3 of bar 15. B flat in the soprano, G in the bass, D flat and E flat in the tenor. That's an E flat major minor 7th chord in first inversion. Now major minor 7th chords, also referred to as the dominant 7th chords, they have that particular quality, and we need to see if this is a pivot modulation. Is there any chord in the key of C minor, diatonic, that includes those 4 pitches? Well, let's think about C minor diatonic here. C, D, E flat, F, G, and then depending on what type of minor, A flat or A, B flat or B. And the answer is no. There's no diatonic chord in C minor that contains a D flat. So we're out of C minor at this point. What we have here, if I were analyzing this, I would call this an abrupt modulation to E flat. It's a 5, 6, 5, and forgive me, there's no good way to do this on the fly here. A 5, 6, 5, a 4, and sure enough, our next chord is a 4 chord, going to a 1, 6, and then a nice extended cadential 6, 4. We're closing out with our 1 chord here. And go on to fill that in there just so we see everything in its entirety. This is what's happening here at the end. Now this is a very quick analysis. I'm only focusing on the direct modulation here. This phrase ends in C minor. With no preparation at all, the next phrase begins in E flat major. That's a new key. I'm not sure why that did that just now, but hey, part of technology is learning all the fun things. Listen to this one more time, and when you get to this segment after bar 11, when we're in the C minor, listen for the direct modulation at the end of bar 15. Solidly. It still sounds like it could be E flat pivoting to B flat rather than a direct modulation there because of the E flat chord on beat 2 of bar 6. But your mileage may vary. At this point, we're clearly in B flat. All the A naturals give that away. Then we pivot into C minor. C minor cadence, and then blam. A phrase modulation. One phrase ends in one key, the next phrase begins in the next key. So anytime there's no preparation for the modulation, that's referred to as a direct modulation. When it lines up with a phrase ending and beginning, then we call that a phrase modulation. So any modulation without a preparation is direct. But for it to be a phrase modulation, it has to take place where one phrase ends in one key and the next phrase begins in the new key. And again, if you were to drill down and analyze this a little further, you might make an argument that, say, beat 2 of bar 16 here would be a 2-6 chord in the key of E flat. This is just sort of a general long-term thing. The emphasis is on the direct modulation here. Print this off or find this. If you've got the 371 Riemann-Schneider chorales, this is number 173 if you're playing along with the home game. So, analyze a little further. See if there's any other interesting things you can find in this. That bass line is beautiful. But I've done enough editorializing here. If you have any questions about phrase and direct modulation, bring them to class. We'll see what we can do with them. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your day.